You think you know power. You think a badge and a gun make you the authority. Watch closely. In the pouring rain of a D.C. suburb, a rookie officer made the single biggest mistake of his life. He saw a black man in a luxury vintage convertible and saw a suspect. He didn't check the plates. He didn't listen to reason. He just saw what he wanted to see. But the man in those handcuffs wasn't a car thief. He was the man who interprets the very laws that officers swore to uphold. This is the story of how arrogance met absolute justice and the karma that shattered a career. The rain in Georgetown doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the cobblestones slick and turns the pavement gray. It was late on a rainy night, the kind of night where the wind cuts through your coat and the street lights fracture into starry blurs on the wet windshields. Justice Thaddeus Vale adjusted the rearview mirror of his vintage cream Mercedes-Benz. It was a pagoda top, pristine cream-white paint restored with the kind of money you save over a lifetime of a career, not the kind you steal in a night. In his early 60s, Thaddeus was a man of heavy silence. He had the posture of a former linebacker and the eyes of a man who had read too many death row appeals. He was an associate justice of the state Supreme Court, a position he had held for over a decade following years on the federal circuit. He was tired. The oral arguments that day regarding State versus Gillingham had been tedious, an endless debate over eminent domain that had drained his patience. He just wanted to get home to his wife Evelyn and the leftover pot roast he knew was waiting in the fridge. He turned onto Wisconsin Avenue, the engine purring with that distinct mechanical German precision. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't swerving. He was listening to a jazz playlist, specifically Miles Davis's Blue and Green, trying to decompress. Several blocks behind him, the narrative of his night was being written by someone else. Officer Harlan Crow was in his mid-20s, several years on the force and bored. He was sitting in his patrol car, a Dodge Charger that smelled of stale coffee and sanitizer, watching the rain pelt the hood. Crow was the kind of cop who wore his sunglasses on the back of his head even at night and kept his hand resting near his holster while ordering a sandwich. He was ambitious, but in the way a hammer is ambitious, looking for nails. "Dispatch 4 Alpha 2, Crow radioed, his eyes narrowing as the cream Mercedes glided past his hideout near the pharmacy. "Go ahead, 4 Alpha 2, the dispatcher's voice crackled, bored and tiny. "I've got a suspicious vehicle, vintage Mercedes, cream, heading north on Wisconsin. No plates visible." Crow lied. The plates were visible. He just hadn't looked hard enough through the rain. But that wasn't why he pulled out. He pulled out because the car looked too expensive, and the silhouette of the driver looked out of place for this time of night in Crow's mental map of the neighborhood. "Copy that. Proceed with caution." Thaddeus saw the burst of red and blue lights in his rearview mirror before he heard the siren. He sighed, a long, weary exhalation that fogged the glass slightly. He turned down Miles Davis. He checked his speedometer. He was driving well within the limit. He checked his signal. He pulled over slowly, safely, under the glow of a street lamp near N Street. He didn't reach for his glove box. He didn't reach for his phone. He knew the drill. He had written opinions on the Fourth Amendment. He knew exactly what was about to happen. And he knew exactly how dangerous it could be, regardless of who he was. He placed both large, scarred hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2 and waited. Crow parked the cruiser at an aggressive angle, blinding the Mercedes with his spotlight. He stepped out into the rain, adjusting his belt. He didn't put on his hat. He walked with a strut, flashlight beam cutting through the drizzle, tapping the rear fender of the classic car as he passed. A dominance move. He shined the light directly into the side mirror, blinding Thaddeus. "Roll it down," Crow barked, tapping the glass with his flashlight hard enough to make Thaddeus wince. The car was decades old. The glass was original. Thaddeus hand-cranked the window down. The cold, wet air rushed in, smelling of rain and asphalt. "Officer," Thaddeus said. His voice was a deep baritone, calm and resonant. Is there a problem? License and registration. Now. Crow didn't say hello. He didn't explain the stop. His hand was already resting on the grip of his service weapon, just hovering. "Officer," Thaddeus repeated, keeping his hands visible. "I am going to reach into my jacket pocket for my wallet. My registration is in the glove compartment. I am informing you of my movements." "I didn't ask for a commentary," Crow snapped. "I asked for the ID. Stop stalling." "I am not stalling. I am ensuring my safety," Thaddeus said, his eyes locking onto Crow's. "May I ask why I was pulled over?" "You don't get to ask questions." "The car fits the description of a vehicle reported stolen in Arlington earlier tonight." Crow improvised. It was a sloppy lie. A stolen vintage Mercedes in Arlington. The odds were astronomical. Thaddeus's brow furrowed. "This vehicle has not left my possession all day. It has been parked in the judicial garage at the Supreme Court building since this morning." Crow froze for a microsecond. The words Supreme Court registered, but his ego swatted them away. He saw a black man in an expensive car giving him attitude. That was the only variable his brain was processing. "Get out of the car," Crow commanded, stepping back and unclipping the safety strap on his holster. "Officer, for a traffic stop unless you have probable cause or a reasonable suspicion of a threat. Asking me to exit the vehicle is—" "I said get out of the car," Crow shouted, his voice cracking slightly. "Now or I will drag you out." Thaddeus looked at the young man. He saw the fear masquerading as aggression. He saw the tremble in the officer's hand. He knew that arguing constitutional law on the side of a rainy road with an adrenaline-spiked rookie was a good way to get shot. Slowly, deliberately, Thaddeus unlatched the door. He swung his legs out. He stood up. He was tall, towering over Crow by several inches. He wore a bespoke charcoal wool suit that cost more than Crow made in a month. "Turn around, hands on the hood!" Crow yelled, unsettled by the man's size. "I'm complying," Thaddeus said softly. He turned and placed his hands on the wet, cold metal of his beloved car. Crow kicked Thaddeus's legs apart. "Wider!" "This is unnecessary," Thaddeus stated. "Check the license plate, officer. It's a vanity plate. Run it." "Shut up!" Crow hissed. He grabbed Thaddeus's wrist and twisted it behind his back, slapping a handcuff on. The metal bit into the skin. "You are making a mistake, son," Thaddeus said, his voice dropping an octave. "A very expensive, career-ending mistake." "The only mistake," Crow said, tightening the second cuff, "was thinking you could joyride through my district." The rain intensified, drumming against the roof of the Mercedes like a nervous heartbeat. Thaddeus stood cuffed in the rain, the water soaking through his wool suit, chilling him to the bone. He maintained a stoic dignity that seemed to infuriate Officer Crow even more. Crow didn't put Thaddeus in the back of the cruiser immediately. He wanted to parade his catch. He wanted to search the car. He left Thaddeus standing by the hood and leaned into his radio. "Dispatch, subject in custody. One male non-compliant. I'm conducting a search of the vehicle incidental to arrest." "Copy 4 Alpha 2. Did you confirm the plates?" "Running them now." Crow lied again. He hadn't run them. He was too focused on the win. He walked over to the driver's side door of the Mercedes and began to rummage. He tossed the contents of the glove box onto the passenger seat. A tire pressure gauge, a packet of napkins, and a leather folio. Crow ripped the folio open. Inside was the vehicle registration and a laminated card. "State Judiciary Official Identification." Crow looked at it. He squinted in the flashlight beam. Justice Thaddeus Vale. His brain did a strange gymnastic routine. Instead of realizing, "Oh no, I've arrested a judge," his brain said, "Fake ID." "Nice try," Crow muttered to himself, tossing the ID onto the wet floor mat. "Really high-quality fake." He continued the search. He popped the trunk. Inside, he found a black garment bag and a heavy wooden box. He opened the box. Inside, resting on blue velvet, was a ceremonial gavel with a gold band. Engraved on the band, Presented to Honorable Thaddeus Vale for years of service to the bar. Crow paused. A seed of doubt finally cracked the shell of his arrogance. But he was too deep in. If he backed down now, he looked weak. He had to find something, anything, to justify the cuffs. Drugs, alcohol, an unregistered weapon. By now the commotion had drawn attention. Georgetown is a neighborhood that never fully sleeps. People were coming out of the bistro and townhouses. Phones were coming out. A young woman with green hair and a nose ring was the first to start filming. Then a man in a jogging suit. "Why is he handcuffed?" the woman shouted. "He wasn't doing anything. We were watching from the window." "Back up!" Crow shouted, shining his light into the faces of the gathering crowd. "Police business! Step back!" "He's an old man," the jogger yelled. "Why are you treating him like a terrorist?" Thaddeus turned his head slightly. "Please," he called out to the crowd, his voice projecting clearly despite the rain. "Do not antagonize the officer. Record the interaction. Do not interfere. Interfere. I need witnesses, not participants." "You be quiet!" Crow stormed back over to Thaddeus. He grabbed the justice by the arm and shoved him roughly toward the patrol car. "Get in." "I have a heart condition, officer," Thaddeus lied. A tactical lie to test the officer's adherence to procedure. "These cuffs are restricting my circulation." "You should have thought about that before you stole a car." "I did not steal this car. If you look at the registration on the floorboard where you threw it, you will see my name matches the registration." "Yeah, and the fake ID matches the fake registration. I know how this works." Crow shoved Thaddeus's head down and forced him into the cramped back seat of the Charger. The door slammed shut. The silence inside the cruiser was absolute, save for the muffled sound of the rain and the police radio. Thaddeus shifted his shoulders, trying to alleviate the pain in his wrists. He took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and began to recite case law in his mind. It kept him calm. Outside, Crow was pacing. He was hyped up on adrenaline. He called for a tow truck. "Dispatch, I need a tow for the subject vehicle. Impound." Then a second police cruiser rolled up. No lights, just a silent approach. A sleek, unmarked SUV followed it. Crow straightened up. "Finally, back up," he muttered. A uniformed sergeant stepped out of the second cruiser. Sergeant Donovan Hale, a veteran with many years on the force, thick around the middle, tired of rookie mistakes. And from the unmarked SUV stepped a tall woman in a trench coat. Detective Lena Harper, sharp, observant, dangerous. "What have we got, Crow?" Hale asked, walking over, eyeing the crowd that was now deep and holding up smartphones like candles at a vigil. "Stolen vehicle recovery, Sarge," Crow said, puffing his chest out. "Subject was non-compliant. Suspected DUI, though I haven't breathalyzed him yet. Found a bunch of weird paraphernalia in the trunk. Gavel, robes, guys running a con." "A con?" Hale looked at the Mercedes. "That's a beautiful vintage car." "Yeah, well, he picked the wrong night." "Who is he?" Detective Harper asked, her voice cutting through the rain. She walked past Crow toward the Mercedes. She peered inside at the mess Crow had made. She saw the registration on the floor. "Some guy named Thaddeus Vale," Crow said dismissively. "Has a fake ID saying he's a judge." Hale stopped. He froze in the middle of lighting a cigarette. The flame of his lighter flickered and died. "Say that name again," Hale said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Thaddeus Vale. Why?" Hale looked at Harper. Harper looked at Hale. The color drained from the sergeant's face so fast it looked like he'd been shot. "Crow," Hale said very slowly. "Where is the suspect?" "In the back of my unit." Hale threw his unlit cigarette into a puddle. He didn't run, but he walked with a terrifying urgency toward Crow's car. He shined his flashlight through the back window. The beam illuminated the face of the man in the back seat. The man looked up. His expression was one of infinite patience and simmering rage. He looked directly at Sergeant Hale and nodded once. Hale knew that face. Everyone in law enforcement in the state knew that face. That was the face that signed the warrants. That was the face that presided over the police oversight committee hearings. Hale turned around. He looked at Crow with eyes that promised murder. "Crow?" Hale whispered. "Give me the keys." "What? Why? I processed him!" "Give me the keys!" Hale roared, a sound so loud it silenced the crowd on the sidewalk. Crow flinched, handing over the keys. "Sarge, what is it? It's just a car thief." "That," Hale hissed, pointing a shaking finger at the back seat, "is Justice Thaddeus Vale of the State Supreme Court." Crow laughed nervously. "No, Sarge, I saw the ID. It looked fake. I was in his courtroom recently." Hale snarled. "That is him. You just handcuffed a Supreme Court justice. You illegally searched his vehicle and you just ended your career." Hale ripped the back door open. "Justice Vale," Hale said, his voice trembling. "I am so sorry. Please let me get these off you." Thaddeus didn't move his hands immediately. He looked past Hale directly at Crow, who was standing in the rain, his mouth slightly open, the water dripping off his nose, as the reality of what he had done began to crash down on him like a collapsing building. "Sergeant Hale," Thaddeus said calmly, "do not remove these cuffs yet. I want Lieutenant Kane here, and I want the body camera footage from Officer Crow secured immediately. I want everything by the book, because I'm going to teach this young man a lesson about the law that he will never ever forget." The atmosphere on N Street had shifted from a routine traffic stop to a crime scene of a different nature. The rain was still falling, but the flashing lights of 3 cruisers and an unmarked SUV painted the wet asphalt in a chaotic strobe of red and blue. Officer Harlan Crow stood by the fender of his Charger, water dripping from the brim of his nose, watching his career dissolve in real time. He felt a cold knot in his stomach. Not remorse, but self-preservation. His mind was racing, trying to construct a narrative that would save him. He resisted. He was belligerent. The car looked stolen. I followed protocol. Inside the cruiser, Justice Thaddeus Vale sat in the dark, hands still cuffed behind his back. The pain in his shoulders was sharp, an old injury flaring up, but he didn't make a sound. He stared at the back of the driver's seat, meditating on the fury that was building behind his calm facade. He wasn't just a victim right now. He was evidence. Minutes later, a black government-issued Tahoe tore down the street, hopping the curb slightly as it parked. The door flew open before the vehicle even fully settled on its suspension. Lieutenant Elias Kane stepped out. Kane was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite and stress. He had been the one who invited Justice Vale to the Police Academy graduation years prior to give the keynote speech. He knew Vale. He respected Vale. Kane marched past Crow without looking at him, straight to Sergeant Hale. "Where is he?" Kane barked. "Back of the unit. Alpha 2, Hale said, looking at the ground. Kane walked to the back door of Crow's car and ripped it open. The dome light flickered on, illuminating the justice. "Thaddeus," Kane breathed, the informality slipping out in his shock. "Justice Vale, my God." "Lieutenant," Vale said, his voice dry, "I see you're making good time." "Get him out of there now," Kane yelled, turning his head toward Crow. "Crow, get the keys. Get these cuffs off him immediately." Crow fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking so badly he dropped them on the wet pavement. He scrambled to pick them up, the metallic clink echoing like an admission of guilt. He moved toward the door, key in hand. "Stop," Vale said. The single word froze everyone. "Sir?" Kane asked. "I do not want Officer Crow to remove these cuffs," Vale said, his eyes hard as flint. "I want to be processed." "Justice, please," Kane pleaded, leaning into the car, rain soaking his uniform. "This is a misunderstanding, a catastrophic screw-up. We can resolve this right here. I'll drive you home myself. We'll expunge the record of the stop." "No," Vale said. "If I were a young kid from the neighborhood, would you expunge the record on the sidewalk? If I were a bricklayer driving home from a double shift, would you be offering me a ride home? Or would I be on my way to central booking?" Silence. stretched between them. Officer Crow made an arrest, Vale continued, his voice rising just enough to be heard by the crowd that was still filming. He claimed probable cause. He claimed I matched the description of a suspect. He claimed I resisted. Those are legal assertions, Lieutenant. They require a legal conclusion. If you release me now, you are covering up his misconduct. I want the booking. I want the fingerprints. I want the mugshot. I want every single step of this humiliation documented in the official record. Sir, you don't want that, Hale interjected. I need that, Vale corrected. Because when I sue this department and this officer, I don't want there to be a single gap in the timeline. Take me to the precinct. Kane closed his eyes, exhaling a breath that ghosted in the cold air. He knew Vale was right. He also knew this was the nightmare scenario. Hale, Kane said quietly, drive Crow's car. Take the justice to the station. Do it by the book. Gentle transport. What about me? Crow asked, his voice small. Kane turned to the young officer. The look on the lieutenant's face was terrifyingly blank. You, Kane said, are going to ride with me, and you are going to pray that the dash cam audio wasn't recording when you decided to violate the civil rights of the highest-ranking judge in the state. Get in the Tahoe. The 2nd District Precinct was a fluorescent-lit box of noise and misery. Phones rang, drunks shouted, and the smell of industrial cleaner fought a losing battle against the smell of unwashed bodies. When the doors opened and Sergeant Hale escorted Justice Vale, still in cuffs, into the intake area, the room didn't go silent immediately. It took a moment. The desk sergeant, an older woman named Griggs, who had seen everything from homicides to lost kittens, looked up over her reading glasses. She saw Hale. Then she saw the tall, distinguished black man in the ruined, bespoke suit. She dropped her pen. Sarge, Griggs asked, standing up. Is that Judge Vale? Book him, Griggs, Hale said, his voice filled with self-loathing. Officer Crow brought him in. On what charge? Griggs demanded, coming around the desk. Being black on a rainy night, Vale answered for them. Grand theft auto and resisting arrest. Allegedly. Hale finally uncuffed Vale. The justice rubbed his wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had bitten into the skin. He looked at them, then held his wrists up to the security camera in the corner of the room. Documenting injuries, Vale muttered. Sir, would you like water, coffee? Griggs asked frantically, looking for a clean cup. I want my phone call, Vale said. And I want to be processed. Fingerprints first. It was a surreal scene. Usually officers forced the suspect's hand onto the ink pad or the digital scanner. Here, Sergeant Hale stood back looking like he wanted to vomit while Justice Vale voluntarily placed his hand on the glass scanner. Beep, beep, beep. The machine accepted the prints. The system ran an automatic check. Within seconds, the computer screen flashed red. Warning! Sensitive profile. Government official DOJ clearance level 5. System flagged him. Griggs whispered. Print it, Vale commanded. Print the arrest sheet. While Griggs typed, trembling, the doors to the precinct swung open again. Lieutenant Kane marched in with Crow trailing behind him like a puppy expecting to be kicked. Crow looked around the room. He saw the way the other cops were looking at him. Not with solidarity, but with the look you give a man who just brought a live grenade into a bunker. Crow, into the interrogation room. Box 1. Sit there and don't touch anything, Kane ordered. Crow slunk away. Justice Vale. Kane approached the intake desk. We have the lawyer you requested on the line, Alan Barrett. The room went quiet again. Alan Barrett wasn't just a lawyer. He was the lawyer. He was the man who sued the city for millions the last time a cop shot the wrong dog. He was a shark who smelled blood in the water from miles away. Vale took the receiver Griggs offered. Alan, Vale said, his voice calm. Jerry! Barrett's voice boomed on the other end, loud enough to be heard through the earpiece. I'm getting bits and pieces. Tell me it's a joke. Tell me you aren't actually at the 2nd District. I am being booked, Alan. Officer Harlan Crow. He stopped me without probable cause, performed an illegal search, used excessive force, and arrested me on a fabricated charge of grand theft auto regarding my own vehicle. I'm leaving my house now," Barrett said, the sound of keys jingling in the background. "Jerry, don't say another word to them. Actually, knowing you've already trapped them in a procedural corner. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I'm bringing the press." "No press yet," Vale said. "I want the internal workings to play out. I want to see if the system corrects itself or if it doubles down. I want to see the police report Crow files." "You want to catch them in a lie?" Barrett chuckled darkly. "You always were a chess player. All right, I'm coming. Hang up." He turned to Crow, who was watching from the doorway of the interrogation room, before Kane shoved him inside. Vale walked over to the glass window of the interrogation room. He couldn't hear what was being said inside, but he could see. He saw Crow sitting at the metal table, head in his hands. Detective Lena Harper walked up beside Vale. She held a tablet. "Justice Vale," she said, her tone professional but apologetic. "I've pulled the GPS data from Crow's cruiser. He was sitting stationary for some time before he pulled you over. He wasn't on patrol. He was headhunting." "Fishing," Vale corrected. "He was looking for a prize, and he caught a whale." "So, we also pulled the stolen vehicle report he mentioned," Harper continued, swiping on the tablet. "There was no report of a stolen Mercedes tonight. There was a stolen Honda Civic in another area. He made it up." "Fabrication of evidence," Vale noted. "That's a felony, Detective." "I know," Harper said. "Sir, Lieutenant Kane wants to know. Do you want to press charges or do you want his badge?" Vale turned to face the room of officers. They were all watching him. The power dynamic had completely inverted. He wasn't the prisoner. He was the judge. And this entire precinct was his courtroom. "I don't want just his badge," Vale said softly. "I want to know who trained him. I want to know who signed off on his evaluations. I want to know why a man with that much bias and that little discipline was given a gun and the authority to take away a citizen's freedom. I'm going to tear this department apart brick by brick until I find the rot." Just then Crow came out of the interrogation room. He looked defiant now, having had a moment to convince himself he was the victim. "You can't keep me in there," Crow spat at Kane. "I followed procedure. He was aggressive." Crow pointed at Vale. He refused to identify himself. Vale took a step closer to the rookie. The height difference was intimidating, but it was the intellect difference that was lethal. "Officer Crow," Vale said, "I identified myself 3 times. You chose not to listen because the truth didn't fit the story you were writing in your head. You saw a black man in a Mercedes and you decided I was a criminal. That is not police work. That is prejudice." "I have a gut instinct," Crow argued, digging his grave deeper. "Your gut," Vale said, "is about to cost the city millions, and it is going to cost you your freedom." "Freedom?" Crow scoffed. "You can't arrest a cop for doing his job." "No." Vale smiled, a cold, shark-like smile. "But we can arrest a cop for filing a false police report, false imprisonment, and assault under color of authority." Vale turned to Lieutenant Kane. "Lieutenant, has Officer Crow filed his official arrest report yet?" "He wrote the preliminary statement in the car. He submitted it digitally minutes ago." "Excellent," Vale said. "Then he has officially committed the crime. He put the lie in writing." Vale looked at Harper. "Detective, I am no longer the suspect. I am the victim of a crime that just occurred in your jurisdiction. I would like to file a formal complaint against Harlan Crow, and I expect him to be booked tonight in this cage with me." The room gasped. "You want me to arrest him?" Kane asked, pointing to Crow. "Equal justice under the law," Vale said. "If I am here for a crime I didn't commit, he should be here for the crimes he did commit. Cuff him." The precinct doors didn't just open. They were assaulted. Alan Barrett pushed through them with the kinetic energy of a Category 5 hurricane. He was a small man, wearing a tan trench coat over a tuxedo. He had evidently come straight from a gala, but he occupied space like a giant. He didn't check in at the front desk. He walked straight into the bullpen, spotting Vale standing by the interrogation room window. "Jerry!" Barrett shouted, ignoring the officers who moved to intercept him. "Don't say a word. Not one word." "Mr. Barrett, you can't just barge in here," Sergeant Griggs called out, though her heart wasn't in it. She knew who he was. Barrett spun around, pointing a manicured finger at her. "I am Alan Barrett. My client is a sitting Supreme Court justice of this state. He has been held without cause. Every second you keep him here is another zero on the check the city will be writing. Now who is the commanding officer?" Lieutenant Kane stepped forward, looking like a man who wished he had taken a sick day. "I am Lieutenant Kane." "Kane," Barrett said, sizing him up. "I want the arrest report. I want the dash cam footage. I want the body cam footage. And I want to know why the hell my client is still in handcuffs." "He requested to remain in them, Counselor," Kane admitted. Barrett looked at Thaddeus. Vale nodded slowly. "Optics, Alan," Vale said calmly. Barrett's eyes gleamed. He understood immediately. "Brilliant. You want the photo op?" "All right, Lieutenant. Has the officer, Crow, was it, filed his report?" "Yes," Kane said. "Good. Then the trap is shut." Barrett clapped his hands. "Now release my client immediately and give me a copy of that report." Kane signaled Hale. Hale approached Vale and with a noticeable sigh of relief unlocked the handcuffs. Vale rubbed his wrists, the red marks stark against his skin. "Detective Harper," Vale said, addressing the investigator who had taken over the scene. "The footage." Detective Harper held up a flash drive. "We just finished reviewing the dashcam audio and video. Justice, you were right." "Play it," Barrett commanded. "Here, now. I want every officer in this room to see what their colleague did." Kane hesitated. "Counselor, this is evidence." "Play it." Vale's voice boomed, regaining the command he held in his courtroom. "This is a public building. That is a public record. Play the tape." Kane nodded to Harper. She plugged the drive into a large monitor on the wall used for briefings. The screen flickered to life. The rain-streaked view from Crow's cruiser appeared. The audio crackled. "Crow, Phi-O. Dispatch, I've got a suspicious vehicle. No plates visible." The video clearly showed the Mercedes vanity plate illuminated by the streetlights. "Lie number 1. Barrett counted aloud. The video continued. Crow pulled the car over. The interaction played out. The officers in the bullpen watched in silence. They saw Crow's aggression. They heard Vale's calm compliance. They heard the lie about the stolen car. But the damning moment came at the end of the clip after Crow had shoved Vale into the car. Crow was walking back to the driver's seat of his cruiser. He thought he was alone. He muttered to himself, audible over the rain. "Cocky old prick thinks he owns the road. Let's see how he likes the cage. I'll find something to pin on him." The room went deathly silent. "Malice," Barrett whispered. "Premeditated malice. He admitted to manufacturing a charge." Vale stared at the screen. He admitted it on a government recording. Just then, the door to interrogation room 1 opened. Officer Crow stepped out, looking pale. He hadn't seen the video being played. He saw everyone staring at him. "What?" Crow asked, defensive. "The guy was resisting. I told you." Lieutenant Kane turned to Crow. The look of camaraderie was gone. In its place was the cold, hard face of the law. "Officer Harlan Crow," Kane said, his voice echoing off the tile walls. "Place your hands behind your back." Crow blinked. "What, sir?" "You are under arrest," Kane said, unclipping his own handcuffs. "For what?" Crow shrieked, backing away. "He's the criminal. He's the one who—" "For filing a false police report, official misconduct, and assault in the 2nd degree," Kane recited. "Turn around now." Crow froze. He looked at Hale. Hale looked away. He looked at the other officers. No one moved to help him. The blue wall of silence had crumbled under the weight of undeniable video evidence and the rank of the victim. Slowly shaking violently, Crow turned around. Click, click. The sound of the cuffs locking onto Crow's wrists was the loudest sound in the room. Vale buttoned his jacket. He smoothed his tie. He walked over to where Crow stood. "You have the right to remain silent," Vale told the young officer. "I strongly suggest you use it because, unlike you, I know the law, and I am going to ensure it applies to you with its full weight." Barrett grabbed Vale's arm. "Jerry, let's go. The press is outside." "The press?" Kane asked, alarmed. "I tweeted on the way over." Barrett smiled aggressively. "CNN is setting up a tripod on the sidewalk." Vale walked out of the precinct, a free man. Behind him, in the cage he had meant for the justice, Officer Crow sat alone, staring at the floor while the booking officer asked him for his belt and shoelaces. The arraignment took place days later. It was the hottest ticket in town. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, community activists, police union representatives, and law students. Justice Vale did not sit on the bench. He sat in the front row of the gallery next to his wife, Evelyn. She held his hand tightly. Vale wore a navy suit looking every bit the statesman. He wasn't there to grandstand. He was there to witness. The judge presiding was Judge Vivian Holt. She was known for cutting through nonsense with surgical precision. She and Vale had served on the appellate circuit together years ago. They were not friends. They disagreed philosophically on many things. But they shared a mutual, terrifying respect for the sanctity of the court. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Holt swept in, her robes billowing. She sat, adjusted her glasses, and looked down at the defense table. Officer Crow sat there. He was in a cheap suit that didn't fit well. He looked smaller than he had in his uniform. His attorney was Victor Lang, a union lawyer known for getting cops off the hook by delaying trials until the public forgot. Docket number: The People versus Harlan Crow. Charges: perjury, falsifying business records, false imprisonment, assault. "How does the defendant plead?" Holt asked. "Not guilty, Your Honor," Lang said, standing up. "And we would like to move for immediate dismissal, based on a lack of probable cause for the arrest of my client." Holt peered over her glasses. "Dismissal, Mr. Lang. I have reviewed the preliminary evidence, including the dashcam footage. The probable cause for your client's arrest seems to be his own voice admitting to a crime." "It was taken out of context, Your Honor," Lang argued. "Officer Crow was venting frustration after a tense encounter. It was not an admission of intent." The district attorney, a sharp woman named Simone Reed, stood up. "Your Honor, the defendant explicitly stated, 'I'll find something to pin on him.' Minutes later, he filed a sworn affidavit claiming the victim was driving a stolen vehicle, a claim he knew to be false. That is not venting. That is framing. We are requesting bail be set at a significant amount." Lang scoffed. "Your Honor, my client is a police officer. He is not a flight risk. He has ties to the community. We request release on his own recognizance." Judge Holt leaned back. She looked at Crow. "Mr. Crow," she said. Her voice was soft, which was usually a bad sign. "You stand accused of using the power of the state to terrorize a citizen. The fact that the citizen happened to be a Supreme Court justice is the only reason we are here so quickly. But the law does not care about his title. It cares about the act." She shuffled her papers. "However," Holt continued, "the court is concerned about the safety of the community. A man who carries a badge and gun and is willing to fabricate evidence is a danger to the public." "Your Honor," Lang protested. "I am setting bail at a high amount," Holt declared. "This is accountability. And Mr. Lang, I am also issuing a protective order. Your client is to have no contact with Justice Vale or any witnesses, and he is to surrender his passport and all personal firearms immediately." Crow looked at his lawyer, panic rising in his eyes. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. As the bailiffs moved to take Crow back into custody, the young officer looked back at the gallery. He locked eyes with Vale. Vale didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just looked at Crow with a profound, heavy sadness. He saw a young life wasted by arrogance and hate. Crow was led away in handcuffs. The irony was lost on no one. Outside the courthouse, the media swarm was intense. Microphones were shoved into Vale's face. "Justice Vale! Justice Vale! Do you think justice was served today?" A reporter yelled. Vale stopped. He stepped to the microphones. The crowd hushed. "Justice was not served today," Vale said, his voice deep and rumbling. "Justice is a process, not a moment. Today, a step was taken. But let us be clear, if I were not who I am, if I were a custodian or a teacher or a mechanic, I would likely still be in that cell, and Officer Crow would still be on patrol. The system worked for me because I am of the system. Our job, my job, is to make sure it works for the people who aren't." "Will you sue the department?" another reporter asked. "My attorney, Mr. Barrett, will be filing a civil rights lawsuit," Vale said. "Not for the money. I will donate every cent of the settlement to the public defender's office. I am suing to force a change in policy. I am suing to ensure that the next time a young man is pulled over in the rain, the officer sees a citizen, not a suspect." He turned and walked away, Evelyn by his side, disappearing into the back seat of the same cream-colored Mercedes that had started it all. But the story wasn't over. The legal system moves slow, but karma moves fast. And for Harlan Crow, the nightmare was just beginning. In the holding cell at the courthouse, Crow sat on a metal bench. He was in the general population, holding area. He was wearing his cheap suit, but he was surrounded by men in orange jumpsuits. A man on the other side of the cell looked at him. A man with tattoos on his neck and a distinct scar over his eye. "Hey," the man said. "I know you." Crow kept his head down. "Yeah, I do." The man stood up. "You're Officer Crow, 2nd District." Crow looked up, terrified. "You arrested my little brother last year," the man said, stepping closer. "Planted evidence on him. He did time because of you." The other men in the cell stood up. They sensed the shift in the air. The guards were on the other side of the heavy steel door. They were slow to react. Crow backed into the corner. "Back off," he warned, his voice shaking. "I'm a police officer." "Not in here." The man smiled, showing a gold tooth. "In here, you're just another inmate." The holding cell in the basement of the courthouse was a cage of concrete and echoing noise. For Officer Harlan Crow, the threat wasn't theoretical anymore. It was standing right in front of him, smelling of stale sweat and old rage. The inmate with the scar, whose name was Jamal Wright, didn't rush him. He let the silence do the work. Crow backed against the bars, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He looked for the guards. The viewing window in the heavy steel door was empty. I didn't mean to," Crow stammered, his police training evaporating in the face of raw survival instinct. "Didn't mean to what?" Jamal stepped closer. "Didn't mean to plant the evidence, or didn't mean to get caught." Another inmate, a younger kid awaiting trial for burglary, laughed. "He looks scared, Jamal. Look at him shaking. Where's that big bad wolf attitude now?" Jamal shoved Crow. It wasn't a punch, just a hard push to the chest that slammed Crow's head back against the steel bars. Clang. "You took years of my life," Jamal hissed, leaning in close. "My mom died while I was inside. You know that? She died thinking her son was a criminal, because you needed to hit a quota." Crow raised his hands to protect his face. I'm sorry. Jamal pulled back a fist, but before he could connect, the heavy steel door of the cell block buzzed and clanked open. "Step away," a correction officer barked, stepping in with a baton raised. The inmates scattered, moving to the benches with practiced innocence. Jamal smiled at Crow, a cold, promising smile. "See you in county, officer." Crow was pulled out of the cell, shaking, humiliated, and marked. He wasn't a cop anymore. In the ecosystem of the jail, he was prey. The trial of the people versus Harlan Crow was the most televised event in the state's judicial history for the year. The defense strategy was desperate. Victor Lang tried to paint Crow as an overworked, stressed rookie who made a good faith error in the heat of the moment. But the prosecution, led by DA Simone Reed, was merciless. She didn't just use the video. She used Crow's own history. She dug up prior complaints of discourtesy that had been swept under the rug by his precinct. The turning point came when Crow took the stand. It was a Hail Mary pass. He wanted to look the jury in the eye and explain himself. "I was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe," Crow said, his voice trembling slightly. "It was dark. The car looked suspicious. I thought I was doing the right thing." Reed stood up for cross-examination. She didn't shout. She walked to the podium, placed a transcript on it, and looked at him over her reading glasses. "Mr. Crow," she started, "you said the car looked suspicious. Can you tell the jury exactly what is suspicious about a vintage luxury Mercedes driving within the speed limit?" It didn't fit the area," Crow said. "Georgetown?" Reed asked. "One of the wealthiest neighborhoods in D.C. A luxury car didn't fit." "I mean at that time of night," Reed pressed. "Is there a curfew for luxury cars?" "No." "So, if the car wasn't the issue and the speed wasn't the issue and the time wasn't the issue, what was left?" "The driver." Crow froze. "I didn't see the driver until I stopped him." "Lies," Reed said, playing a snippet of the dashcam video again. The headlights clearly illuminated Vale's silhouette before the lights went on. "You saw a black man. You assumed he stole it. That is the only variable, isn't it?" "I am not a racist," Crow snapped, losing his cool. "I didn't ask if you were a racist, Mr. Crow. I asked if you profiled him. But your outburst answers the question quite well." Reed turned to the jury. No further questions. The verdict came after the jury deliberated for a short time. When they returned, the courtroom was packed. Justice Vale sat in the back, silent, a sentinel of the law. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Harlan Crow, guilty on all counts." Crow closed his eyes. His mother, sitting behind him, began to sob. Judge Holt didn't wait for a sentencing hearing. She had the guidelines ready. "Harlan Crow, please stand." Crow stood, his legs feeling like water. "You have disgraced your uniform," Holt said, her voice cutting through the room. "You took an oath to protect the Constitution. Instead, you treated it as an inconvenience. You assaulted a man not because of what he did, but because of who you decided he was, and then you tried to frame him to cover your tracks." She paused. "I sentence you to several years in the state penitentiary with a minimum to be served before eligibility for parole. You are immediately remanded into custody." The gavel banged. It was final. The hard karma of prison for a former cop is not like prison for anyone else. It is a solitary nightmare. Crow was placed in protective custody to keep him from being killed in the general population. But PC isn't safety, it's isolation. He spent nearly all day in a small cell. He had no interaction with other humans except for the guards who looked at him with disdain. To them, he was a dirty cop. The worst kind. The kind that makes their jobs harder. He lost everything. His girlfriend left him months in. His friends from the force stopped writing after the appeal was denied. He went bankrupt fighting the legal battles. The hard karma wasn't just the physical confinement, it was the psychological erosion. He had defined himself by his authority. Now he had none. He had to ask permission to shower. He had to ask permission to eat. He was stripped of his ego layer by painful layer, until all that was left was the realization of his own stupidity. He had plenty of time to think about Thaddeus Vale. He thought about that rainy night every single day. He replayed it. If I had just looked at the plate. If I had just listened. If I had just apologized. Regret, he learned, tastes like cold oatmeal and iron bars. While Crow rotted, Thaddeus Vale thrived. He won the civil suit against the city. The settlement was millions. True to his word, Thaddeus didn't keep a dime. He founded the Vale Initiative for Justice, a legal aid clinic dedicated to representing victims of police misconduct and funding body cam analysis for public defenders. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Alan Barrett stood by his side. "You turned a traffic stop into a movement, Jerry," Barrett said. "No," Thaddeus said, looking at the fresh paint of the clinic. I just turned the lights on. The cockroaches were always there. Now we just have a better way to catch them. Thaddeus continued to serve on the Supreme Court, his opinions becoming even more pointed, more focused on the nuance of power and individual rights. He became a legend, not just a judge, but a symbol, the man the system couldn't break. Years later, the final twist. The rain in Georgetown was just as cold years later. Thaddeus Vale, now older but moving with the same quiet dignity, pulled his beloved vintage cream Mercedes up to the entrance of the Willard, one of D.C.'s swankiest hotels. He and Evelyn were attending a charity gala. The valet stand was busy. A man in a red vest was sprinting back and forth, grabbing keys, opening doors, hustling for tips. He looked tired. His face was lined with premature aging and his hair was thinning. He ran up to Thaddeus's car. He didn't look at the driver. He looked at the hood ornament. "Good evening, sir. Valet parking is $40, the man said, his voice raspy. He reached for the door handle. Thaddeus rolled down the window. "Good evening." The valet froze. He knew that voice, that deep baritone resonance. The valet looked down. It was Harlan Crow. He was out on parole. He couldn't work in security. He couldn't carry a gun. He couldn't get a government job. He was working for minimum wage plus tips, parking cars for the people he used to police. Crow stared at Thaddeus. His face went pale, then flushed with a deep, burning shame. He looked at the leather seats. He looked at the steering wheel he had once ordered Thaddeus to release. "Justice Vale," Crow whispered. Thaddeus looked at him. He saw the broken man. He saw the fear. He didn't see a monster anymore. He just saw a tragedy. "Mr. Crow," Thaddeus said calmly. Crow couldn't move. I can get someone else to park it, sir. I can't touch this car." "It's just a car, son," Thaddeus said. He opened the door and stepped out. He handed the keys to Crow. Crow looked at the keys in his palm. They felt heavy. "Be careful with second gear," Thaddeus said, adjusting his tuxedo jacket. "It sticks a little when it's cold." "Sir." Crow looked up, tears forming in his eyes. "After everything, you trust me with this?" Thaddeus placed a hand on Crow's shoulder. It wasn't a heavy hand, but it held the weight of the world. "I don't trust you, Mr. Crow," Thaddeus said softly, "but I believe in rehabilitation. You paid your debt. Now, do your job." Thaddeus handed him a $20 bill, a tip. "Keep it dry," Thaddeus said. He took Evelyn's arm and walked into the hotel, leaving Crow standing in the rain, holding the keys to the life he had destroyed, weeping silently under the glow of the hotel lights. The karma wasn't that he was in jail. The karma was that he was free, but he had to serve the man he tried to break, and he had to do it with a "thank you, sir." And that is the story of Justice Thaddeus Vale and Officer Harlan Crow. It serves as a brutal reminder that authority is borrowed, not owned. Crow forgot that the badge on his chest was a symbol of service, not a shield for his ego. He learned the hard way that when you strike at the law strikes back, and it rarely misses. Justice showed us that true power isn't about loudness or aggression. It's about composure, knowledge, and the unshakable belief in what is right. In the end, the roles were reversed, not by magic, but by the inevitable grinding gears of justice. Wow, that was intense, right? The moment Crow realized who he had handcuffed. Absolute chills. It makes you wonder how many times things like this happen when there isn't a Supreme Court justice in the car. If this story got your blood boiling or gave you a sense of satisfaction at the end, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a video.